Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Underground Warriors podcast. I'm here with a really good friend and amazing human being, Gary Miller. Gary Miller is an Olympic alpine ski coach, among other things, executive coach, entrepreneur, absolutely amazing human being, specializing in human performance. Has worked with some amazing people over the years to help them become champions and stay optimized under pressure. So, Gary, so glad to have you here. Um, so, today we're going to be talking a little bit about human performance and what it looks like not only for elite athletes, but also for the everyday person. And Gary's leading the charge on that with actually some technology called the Human Charger. So, we'll talk about that today as well. I've been testing it out. It's absolutely amazing. Been seeing shifts in my performance, especially after working out and traveling. So, Gary, welcome.
Thank you very much, John. You're all too kind with your compliments, and I really appreciate it. So,
Absolutely. So, tell us a little bit about the journey, you know, that it took you to get to where you are today. You know, pretty diverse background. So, what was the trigger? What was the thing that sparked that passion for performance?
wow, that's I'm pretty far down the tracks, So this is a long one, but I'm a well traveled soul. I grew up in a shipbuilding town in Wisconsin and became a ski racer, uh, which is a little bit of a strange path, but I started traveling the world when I was 15 years old. I'd go to Argentina to train in the winter climate down there during the summers, and then I started racing in Europe, and I've been all over the world, and went to the University of Colorado and skied for them, and I had aspirations. I wanted to make the Olympic team, and had some pretty severe issues with my back. Had a disc that was blown out, and that kind of put a stop to things. And which for me was a pretty big challenge because as a kid growing up, you have this dream of becoming an Olympian, and and when you finally have to hang up the skis and say you just can't go any further, um, you've got to pivot. You got to do something. And I started getting into coaching and figured out that the dream maybe wouldn't quite die that fast. Um, and I knew the right people in the right places, and I pursued that, and I worked hard, and became a coach for the national team, and eventually got to go to the Olympics as a coach, which is actually in some ways is more rare than going as an athlete. And to me, that was kind of a never give up attitude, um, that has kept me going in as I transitioned out of coaching into the business world. Building different products and representing different products, and you just never give up. You just can't ever give up, and a lot of people do. They get disappointed. I mean, we've had businesses fail. We've had things not work, but you just head down, keep grinding all the time.
Yeah, there's a lot we can dig into there. First few things that are popping up for me is the idea of this nomadic lifestyle or this adventure bug that we all get, and I think that many of us let that fire go out, because of responsibilities or obligations or all these other fun things, or even sometimes running a business. We get into the weeds of it and we don't take time to spend doing that. So I'd be curious to explore that like that bug that you in at age 15 that you followed. Most people feel that but they don't pursue it, so that's an interesting mindset to potentially explore. Then also the idea of transition, because there's a lot of people that are making transitions from you know doing the sport or being involved in it to another transition, which is into the coaching realm. So transitioning from the athlete to the to the coach happens with veterans too, coming from the military and going into civilian, happens to students coming from college, going into the workforce, happens from people leaving the workforce and starting entrepreneurship. So there is this mindset of resiliency and never giving up on those dreams. And so many people, when they hit the wall, they get frustrated, they get overwhelmed, they feel the same way that they did before they were looking to make the transition, and then they go back into that comfort zone. So have you navigated or connected with that passion for travel, adventure, pushing yourself outside the comfort zone, and then also the different transitions that you made? I think that would be helpful to explore.
Yeah, you hit on some good points, and the travel bug did hit me when I started going to Argentina as a young kid at 15. And when I was in high school, I wanted to run track, and my father said, "Hey, listen, that'd be fine, but you want to go to Argentina and you want to spend the month down there, and it's we can't foot the bill for it entirely, so you're going to have to work at our store during the spring instead of running track, and make your choices. Do you want to go to Argentina for a month, or do you want to run track and not go?" And it was like, after I'd been once, I couldn't wait to get back. And so you make these choices, and back in the day, that was a long journey. I mean, if you flew from Chicago you go Chicago, Miami, and then you would fly to Rio de Janeiro, and then you'd fly to Buenos Aires, and then you'd fly into Bariloche. If you were coming from the West Coast, it was LA, Mexico City, Bogota, Colombia, Lima, Peru, Santiago, Chile, and then you'd go to Buenos Aires. You didn't have a lot of these non-stops, and they were the old 707s, and they were crowded and packed with people, but it was so magical to be in a city like Buenos Aires during the Perón era. Okay, this is when Juan and Evo Perón were ruling the country, and you had two types of currencies. You had old money, okay, that had lots of zeros on it, and you had new money which had fewer zeros on it. You had to know which was which, and you would trade your American dollars on the black market because you didn't want to go to a bank. You'd get scalped there. But there were all these little things, that were just, the world was so big. And I can tell you, if I look back on my career, and when I think of my school, my education, high school, and even college, the best education anybody can ever have is travel. Everybody should travel. They should go see Europe. They should go see South America. They should go to Asia. They should go to Australia. It is the best education you could ever have.
Yeah, it changes you too. I mean, when I traveled down to Costa Rica and lived there for 4 months, my family said when I came back, I was a completely different person, because you step into faith, and with travel, there's less structure, and the more you surrender to it, the more things open up, and you wind up meeting people out of the blue and like making friends and having all these unplanned experiences.
That's the key. It's the unplanned experiences. It's like, how do I change money, or where do I go to get something, or what restaurants do I like? And there's all these different elements that kind of get thrown at you, and it's a little more complex, I think, today than it was back in those days. But to understand different cultures is really, really important. And I've always said this, and I'll talking about the politicians today. You want to be a politician, it should be an unwritten rule that you have had to have spent at least 2 or 3 weeks in the 4 or 5 different areas of the planet. Okay, you've got to be in Asia, you got to be gone to Europe, you've got to go to the Middle East, you got to go to South America to understand cultures. If they did that, they'd be much better politicians, they'd be much better leaders than they would be. Some of these people have never traveled anywhere. It's crazy.
100%. I agree with you. It opens your eyes. There was even with, for example, I was again in Costa Rica, and I was thanking somebody by making them dinner or like a steak because they helped me out, or forget exactly what. But it was like, hey, thanks for showing up, helping me out. I want to make you dinner. So I made this like nice like steak dinner, and went to sit down, and she goes, oh, well, let me invite this person, that person, this person. It's like the whole community. I was like, oh, wow. Like I didn't even, like as an American, I didn't even think about that. The whole entire community to come together for this meal. So that was eye opening. And then the community and the connection, in a simplified version of connection in nature. And it's powerful. And then going over to Asia for the first time, that was completely eye-opening. And think about even the students that aren't getting these experiences studying abroad, and so many different things you can learn from other people. I agree 100% with that. And so as you're going down this journey, experiencing and learning and growing, you're getting this like world knowledge and information and experience that then you take into your career. And I bet it made you more compassionate, more understanding, seeing a bigger picture in that. But I'd also love to hear, what was like that biggest challenge that you overcame in that early phase of your life leading into the coaching phase, where you said a lot of people give up on their dreams. So what was the biggest challenge that you overcame in that early stage of your life to keep on going?
Well, I think it's hard in the athletic world because you really have to be connected somehow. Okay, and I was fortunate because I was a fairly accomplished ski racer. I didn't race on the World Cup level. I wasn't that good, but I was on the Europa Cup level, and I was highly ranked in the U.S. And obviously there were injuries that happen. Ski racing is a brutal sport, and it usually takes a lot of them out of their careers. I knew going in to the coaching side that I wanted to stay in the ski racing world, and I knew the ski racing world. Okay, so that made it somewhat easy. But trying to convey that to younger athletes was a challenge. Okay, I had to learn a lot of things, and early on, I was I think one of the youngest coaches on the World Cup with my guys back in the '80s, and I had a really good group of athletes, but I wasn't that great as a manager sort of coach, right?
Mhm.
And I think that was the big challenge, was to try to be more of a manager than anything else, because at that level, these guys, they know pretty much what they're doing. You just got to make sure that you provide all of those things that they need,
Mhm.
at that level. And those were some early challenges, but it was a little more natural to me than, say, my transition from the skiing world into the business world. Now that was more of a challenge.
Yeah.
But as I became a better coach and a better manager, it made that transition easier. And I went from coaching to some filmmaking, um, with extreme skiers jumping off cliffs and stuff like that. We were flying around the world doing stuff like that, which was great. And that really wasn't coaching much. That was just filmmaking. But it's when I ran into a gentleman that had a business manufacturing sports bags and luggage for a lot of different companies, and said, hey, I don't have anybody in the sports world because they can do sports bags and luggage for ski companies and sports companies and things like that. And I was like, hey, this sounds great, but I had nowhere to start. I mean, I was really green when I started that. And but I applied the same principles that I did when I was coaching, which allowed me to be really structured, very disciplined, hardworking, head down, grinding, and you learn. You just start learning. And instead of going to Europe all the time, I was going to Asia because that's where the factories were. And so you just you have to learn to do hard things. I talk about that a lot with clients and business people today. You got to learn to do hard things, and you're going to be outside your comfort zone a lot, but that's a good thing because the more you're taxed, the more it pushes you into figuring things out, and you become better. Are you going to make the right decision all the time? No, absolutely not. But that's part of life. We don't all go through life making the right decision. There's a lot of screw ups here and there. So it's just doing hard things and accepting what comes your way, and eventually, it took me 3-4 years of trying to get a business going that was way outside my bandwidth, for sure.
Yeah. What for me, what comes up is the idea of mastering the unknown. So it sounds like you've become a master of mastering the unknown and bringing in techniques, methodologies, mindsets in order to move through that chaos, to stay committed, to stay disciplined as you're moving towards the goals that you have, whether it's as an athlete, as an entrepreneur, as a spouse, whatever that is that you're showing up in this world as. How can you do it in a way that you're not blowing yourself up in the process? You're not burning yourself out in the process, which is really common. I think that might be a good transition to talk a little bit about some of the performance strategies that you've mastered over the last many years for those situations. So now that you have the mindset right, you've determined that you have the discipline, you've developed that skill set, you've moved into this next stage, and you've put in, say, a few years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years into your craft as an athlete or an entrepreneur. What are some of those critical things that you found? And then some of the research on the technology and things that you're getting out to the world now that are helping people to really live their best life and perform optimally.
John, thank God for athletics. Honestly, you know, I've been fortunate to be in a wonderful sport that even as brutal as ski racing is, and as dangerous as it is, it gave me that discipline, and it gave me that ability to do hard things. And one of the things that I think, one of the most important things, especially for young entrepreneurs, is, I call it developing a process. There's a lot of people out there saying, "Oh, you've got to set goals, and then you've got to break the goals down and all this stuff." I don't look at goals. Goals are nothing but a target. Okay, I look at a process, and every elite athlete that gets to a certain level has a really, really, defined process. And that's everything from what do you do when you wake up in the morning, and they're steps. There are all these steps, but they're highly disciplined steps. They're highly refined. Elite athletes have hundreds of these things that you do consistently on a daily basis to keep you focused, because it just narrows your focus, and it allows you to do things at a little bit higher level. Okay, it's funny because I just wrote an article about athletes that come up, and I'll use the example of collegiate athletes that come up from the from college, whether it's basketball, football, or any other sport, and then they get into the professional ranks. Okay, that's a huge transition. Okay, and then with NIL today and all this money that they're throwing at these athletes, is a tough one. And they get up to the big leagues and they think they're all that, but they're not. They're not physically strong enough. They're not mentally tough enough. They don't have enough of a process. And, and the numbers of athletes that truly make it in the professional ranks is very, very small. But thank God to have that sort of structure, because business is no different. You're developing a product, or you want to launch a product. I mean, we're you and I got connected because of our human charger project. It was something that my wife and I found in Austria 2 years ago that had been hiding in Europe for a decade, and nobody in the U.S. had ever seen it. And it was a simple little bright light headset that you could use to manage your circadian rhythm. And it works for jet lag, it works for depression, it works for improving your psychomotor speed, which is your reaction time. And we saw a window to be able to bring that to the average Joe. But without this process to be able to do that, you're just floundering. You need a process.
Yeah.
A very highly disciplined process.
100%.
And then what happens is with focus, with really sharp focus, it's amazing what you can do.
Yeah. Me and my wife were just talking about that yesterday. So I've always been somebody who has a lot of ideas, right? A little bit of scattered attention, multiple projects. And what I've learned to do, which seems counterintuitive for me because it feels very expansive to have multiple things going at the same time. And I think also I struggle with potentially like executive functioning, putting things in order and prioritizing over the years. So it takes me extreme focus to stay in that focused lane and systems. So, and I agree 100%. You give two people the same exact like information or strategy in order to get something done. And then one person may struggle and the other person all of a sudden takes off and has success. So what's the difference? I think there's two differences. One is the internal state, the dialogue and conversations that they're having underneath the surface with subconscious, beliefs and all that other fun stuff. And I think one of the most important on top of that is the systems that are in place for them, and systems that work for them, not like something that works for one person may not work for every person unless you found a different in your work. So what system are you using specifically that somebody else out there could apply in potentially their business, let's say? So how do you look at the system and creating it effectively? What are the components, inside of your journey in getting the human charger out there to the world?
It's a great question because you're right. Most people don't have systems in place like this. To me, it's this repetition all the time. Okay. And again, I go back and thank God for the athletic career because, and maybe even more in the coaching, because coaching at a really high level, you can't afford to screw up. So everything you do is double checked, triple checked. So you develop this process in your head. So for example, for me, every day I get up at a certain time and I get into my workout gear. I hydrate with 40 ounces of, lukewarm water, have a little fruit, which is natural sugar, little energy, and out the door I go. And I have an hour of exercise, normally out in nature, because I think it's better in nature. I don't care if it's raining, snowing, cold, warm, it doesn't matter. I dress for the elements. I go out. I go religiously. I go out and do this, and I have music playing. I have different ways to count. I count in different numbers, whether by twos, by ones, by threes, sometimes in a different language. And I've got music going with someone singing, and you're trying to concentrate on a particular exercise. And it's an hour of a circuit of doing multiple exercises. I also find it's my most creative time. Okay, all of a sudden things come to mind, and then I jot them down. And but it's always this process. I come back, I get cleaned up, I sit at the computer, have my tea. Everything is done really methodically, one thing right after the other, and I don't deviate from that. It's really rare if I ever deviate from that, and that allows me to stay super focused. And you're always going to have hiccups and things like that, but you try to stick to that process, and you get really good at it after a while, and then
Yeah.
it becomes second nature,
Yeah.
which is what you want, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a similar routine. I was somebody that didn't like routine growing up. Like I wanted complete flexibility and fluidity. And then when I started using my calendar, I started, being disciplined with my time. It really did feel as you can be fluid and flexible in a structure. And I didn't realize that early on in my career. So that was a big shift. The structure. So when you have those days, and I was listening to a podcast recently, I forget who it was, but they're talking about, an ultra marathon runner, one of the top in the world. And she said that you would think that I have like a set routine, which she probably does. But she said that she actually listens to her body in that routine and maybe adjusts certain things. So how have you personally and with others, whether it's entrepreneurs, athletes, had that conversation with them where they're listening to their body, but they're also still in that high performance routine?
Yeah, you have to listen to your body. I mean, that's but what's really interesting is if I go back probably about 5 years ago when we were living in Park City, Utah. um I've had four knee surgeries on my right knee, and the last time I went in to see Doc Hayden, who was the golden boy, the skater that won what, 7 gold medals or something in the Olympics. I mean, he was a great guy. We were in Calgary at the Olympics together, and but he was giving me cortisone shots in my knee because my knee would swell right after skiing or exercising and doing whatever. And the last time he said, "Hey, you're going to need a knee replacement," and I'm like, it's kind of the last thing I really want to do. I'm not afraid of surgeries; I've had enough of them, but I just didn't feel like it was that necessary. And I started doing a little research, and come to find out, certain specific exercises can really benefit your body. And I was going through a period of time where you're under a lot of stress, your body was kind of achy, and uh, I just said I have to do something different. And I developed this circuit of body weight exercises. I'm old enough now where I don't need to go into a gym and lift heavy weights. I just don't need it. My joints aren't going to like it that much. And so everything I do is body weight and core. And when I started doing that, it didn't take very long, but within about probably 6 to 9 months, all of a sudden, I didn't have pain anymore. It was like it just disappeared. So, and I'm thinking to myself, okay. And the more research I did on it, the more I found that by doing these types of things, I don't have that pain anymore.
Yeah.
Just don't.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be 50 in April. Hate to admit it, but yeah, I mean, sometimes the more I push myself, it feels like I'm not doing a positive thing to my body. And so I've been doing the same thing, body weight, like kettlebell, Even like I love animal flow, like moving in different ways and getting your body moving in ways that it doesn't normally move if you're sitting at a computer or walking or doing your average everyday stuff. But things that we did when we were back in tribal days and, living in tribes and hunting and finding our food and all that other fun stuff. And yeah, so that's really important to listen to the body. And then as far as the technology and the things that are coming out and what you're working on with the human charger, that component of it, in knowing when to supplement and when to add these things, because it's like there's so many things out there, right, that we're getting bombarded with. Let's talk a little bit about the research back, because there's research on, with the body weight and getting up in age, and there's research on some of this technology that you're getting out there into the world. Maybe we talk a little bit about the technology and the history of that piece of it, of what you're integrating into your coaching, into your entrepreneurship and business.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a techie. I mean, I love the technology that's out there today. I mean, this is making life a lot easier for us, and that includes AI. I mean, a lot of people. My wife said to me this morning, she said, I think our daughter's really scared about AI, and it's like, well, I mean, like, AI could get out of control too. But I think it's technology like this. And I'm quite a bit older than you, but I still, man, technology is cool. And like I said, when my wife and I found this human charger, I didn't really know much about light and how it would affect your circadian rhythm, which is your body clock. Your biological clock runs on light cues, right? And back before computers and all that sort of stuff, you'd wake up in the morning by the sun. And then when the sun goes down at night, it gets dark. Well, you wind things down. I grew up, we didn't have the TVs and the computers and all that sort of jazz that they have today. And so it was natural for us. And, but, being in Europe and running into an old friend of mine who I'd done some business with and built some product for him. He turned me on to this guy that had a product from Finland where they suffer from long, dark winters. Okay. And they have this seasonal affective disorder, this seasonal depression. And, it came ironically from Nokia, the phone company. And Nokia was struggling a bit when Apple came out with the iPhone, and Nokia was a little bit asleep at the wheel, because I mean, everybody had a Nokia phone at one point. Now all of a sudden, that was not the cool thing. So they were sleeping in Helsinki a little bit, and this engineer and a scientist branched off and started this product to give more light cues to the human body to help offset this depression, this winter depression. And they found that transcranial bright light was better than looking at a lamp and staring at a lamp for 45 minutes to an hour. Okay. And people don't have that kind of time today anyway. So, for 12 minutes, you stick those earbuds in your ears and you've got the same 10,000 lux of bright light, and it goes through your ear canal. And we started testing it, and my wife, who does suffer from seasonal depression, was like, wow, this is a game changer for me. And then we sort of had hints that it would help with jet lag. So we started testing it, flying back and forth from the US to Europe and back. And it's like, we couldn't believe the difference. And I mean, listen, as you said before, I've traveled the world. I've been to 56 different countries, and I've been traveling since I was 15 years old. And I've suffered jet lag, whether it's been Asia, Europe, doesn't matter. And this thing, it is like a magic wand. And you treat yourself 4 or 5 times a day, the first 2 days that you arrive, and it completely resets your circadian rhythm. It just advances it so that you can get on the destination time. And I think things like that, you know, if you look at the athletic side of things, I'm always looking for things that you can enhance your performance without being a drug or anything like this, because it's just light. It works fantastic, and it's safe. And if it can give an athlete, you know, a little bit more reaction time, that's fantastic. If with all, I mean, think about the collegiate stuff in America where all these conference realignments, these sports teams now are traveling way more than they used to. They're flying all over the country half the time, and they're trying to balance school, training, competition, finals, the whole 9 yards, and it's almost impossible. And mentally staying sharp enough and not getting depressed, this product is like a lifesaver.
Yeah.
Never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm thinking to some of the surf trips that I've taken where you fly in a little bit, you know, late or early, you stay up and, you know, you're out there surfing on, you know, 10, 15 foot waves and you're feeling a little bit groggy, you know, that's not a good place to feel, you know, tired or not have your reaction time up to where it needs to be. And I'm sure that's in Olympics as well. And other athletes is really being on point in a few little milliseconds could possibly mean the difference between life and death. So I'll take any kind of improvements where I can get them, you know, when it comes to taking risks and, you know, performing. And even for entrepreneurs, like going into doing a talk or a presentation or any of those things, people can sense, you know, where you're at mentally when you're showing up. So it's those small little changes, like a small 5% change can make a huge impact in our lives. And a lot of people just don't take the time to look into it or test it or, you know, see if it works for your body, because everybody's different. But, you know, for millions of years, you know, we've kind of lived by the sun, and I think everybody can relate to going out and spending time out in nature and in the sun and feeling differently. So when there isn't that natural light to get access to, why not leverage technology in order to activate those things that are happening naturally? And I'm sure there's some longevity in that as well, you know, the way we're feeling internally. So yeah, anything having to do with performance enhancement, making life just a little bit easier with all the chaos that we're navigating. I mean, that I'm all for it.
Well, and honestly, John, blue light is the killer right now.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, 25, 30 years ago when we didn't have the computers and all that sort of stuff. I mean, now we've got all these blue screens staring at us, which, you know, goes through the optic nerve, and it screws up the hormones that are supposed to keep you balanced and your biological clock. And, you know, you add that on top of it, and then you really, you know, you can see why these guys are struggling. And it's really important to be able to have something that can reset the balance again. I mean, that's
absolutely
crucial.
And as we look to 2026 and some of the things that you're up to, and, you know, ways that people can get a hold of you or a human charger and, or, you know, support the mission that you're on, you know, what's 2026 looking like, and what would be some really good things for to come into your world?
Well, you know, I think for 2026, one of the things that we want to do is get more into the corporate world, because, like you said, if you're arriving after a 7 or 8 hour flight and you've got to go into a board meeting, or you've got to make a major presentation for a big merger or something like that, you've got to be sharp. There's just no way around it. We've looked at the studies, and it's literally hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars are lost. Business revenue is lost due to jet lag. It's staggering. It's one thing on the athletic side, you know. I mean, if you're in an individual sport, I call it the 0.01 advantage. Okay, in the sport of ski racing, 0.01 is the difference between first and second. So you're either going to win the race or you're going to be a participant. And that's the bottom line. You're going into a big board meeting and you're working on a merger and something, you're not sharp and something goes south. It doesn't happen. It affects everybody, the shareholders, the company personnel, could affect your job. These are critical things. Our lives now have become more complicated. They require more things like this. We need to use this kind of technology. So we want to make the corporate world more aware that they have tools like this that can help them overcome jet lag or be a little bit sharper. It's no different than if I go out, like you had mentioned, if you go out and you're in the sun and you're participating in an athletic event, you usually feel pretty good about things. But you go out on in the ski racing world, you go out on a cloudy day where it's snowing a little bit and it's dark and you don't have much light, okay, your body's going to be affected. I don't care who it is. And it could be a rainy day on a triathlon. And even participating in a football match or a basketball game or a hockey game in an arena, you don't get enough light.
Yeah.
You just don't.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. So these little things. So we're really focusing on athletics, the corporate world, and jet lag. Jet lag for the average person that wants to spend, they're taking the trip of a lifetime. They want to go to Europe and they've never been there. They don't want to lose 3 days where they feel like crap, right? They want to be able to hit the ground running and take advantage of that week. And so it's an every person product. It's simple, it's affordable, easy to use, compact. Throw it in your purse, throw it in your knapsack. Make your life just a lot more enjoyable.
Absolutely. And even at the very least, when you use it, and speaking from personal experience, when I took my trip just after we met, the charger got to my house after I left, and I was going through the trip. I'm like, man, I wish I had this here on this trip, because I did feel the experience of like being a little bit of jet lag and dragging a little bit. And then when I got home and I started using it in the mornings, I absolutely felt a difference in the morning time. The mornings that I do use it and I don't use it, feel a difference. But specifically when I'm working out too, which I think is interesting. I don't know if there's more blood flow or what's going on when you work out, but those days where I do it when I work out, get up and work out, like I feel like a boost for like 3 hours, like noticeable, and then put it on in the afternoon and feel it as well if I'm feeling a little bit off. And at the very least, even if it does feel like it's de-stressing a little bit for some reason, like feels like there's a little bit less stress in the day, on those days that I'm using it, which is super cool as well. So it's small things sometimes in life that if we pay attention to them, they make a huge difference. So,
they do. It is the little things. And I, like you, I experience it and I failed to mention it in my process because, when I do get up, the first thing that I do while I'm drinking all that water is put the human charger on. And I notice when I go out and do my circuit, okay, out in the trails behind the house, and is that I'm just sharper. My head is, there isn't a bright sun this time of the year shining in my eyes and lighting me up and getting me going for the day and triggering my hormones. This has to do it. This is the thing that has to do it. And I've done it with and without. And when I use it, it definitely helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got a lot of people too that like to use it in the afternoon instead of a coffee, or a Red Bull or something like that, just to give them a little bit of a bump. And it's a strange bump though. It's not like having a shot of, espresso in the afternoon. It's just all of a sudden 20, 30 minutes later, you're just wide awake and it
Yeah.
doesn't fade. It just
Hmm.
doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. And I was a little skeptical at first, but I'm a true believer now, and otherwise we wouldn't have taken it on. But it's I think there's huge potential, and yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And people can get, if they want to pick one up, it's humancharger.us, correct?
Humancharger.us. They can also go to humancharger.com. It doesn't matter because um, thanks to the Trump administration, they did away with a lot of these these smaller shipments from overseas, and so we basically fulfill everything that comes in. And we in 2026 we will have our own TikTok shop, and you'll also be able to get it on the TikTok shop at humanchargerusa.com. So yeah, lots of good things coming in 26. I think we have a lot more people now that are starting to understand that you know light is really important, and if it can give you a little bit of an edge, hey, why not? Right? We need every edge we can get these days.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I love it, and I very much appreciate you sending one out to test out, and I definitely want to support in any way possible. So let us know how we can do that. If you're listening in, reach out, and spread the news. Like there's things out there that are they're improving people's lives, and I think we all deserve a little bit more light in our world.
Yeah, well said, John. No, and you've done a great job, and we, with your help, we are getting the word out, and it's really important because people need the advantage today. Life has become pretty complicated, so if we can help that along, that's great. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
have a little fun along the way too. So hopefully we get to spend some more time together on some adventures here in the future, and then we'll share it with a bunch of people and share the results with you. So appreciate you so much, Gary. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll be in touch and have a wonderful few weeks here coming into
Yeah,
the end of the year.
John, thank you very much, and have a wonderful Christmas, and yeah, after the new year, we'll kick it again.
All right, sounds good. All right.